My guest this morning is Elwood David Watson, Ph.D. As I was chatting with him, I call him Dr. Watson. He's an experienced college administrator and professor with 16 or more years of experience, because I'm reading the bio, so the numbers may have changed since it was written, of educating and overseeing students. The two of us have that in common in terms of us being educators. Enthusiastic and motivated in delivery of courses and curriculum to develop the leaders of tomorrow. He's a highly professional, has a well-rounded combination of interpersonal communications and analytic skills. And I know he contributes to a dynamic and progressive learning institution, whichever one that is or where he is. I believe he's down in Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. He has published many books, but the one we're going to be talking about this morning, actually we're going to work our way up to that, is his latest release, which is Keepin It Real, Essays on Race in Contemporary America. The past decade has been one of the most racially turbulent periods in the modern era, as the complicated breakthrough of the Obama presidency gave way to the racially charged campaigning and eventual governing of Donald Trump. Keepin It Real presents a wide-ranging group of essays that take on key aspects of the current landscape surrounding racial issues in America, including the place of the Obamas, the rise of the alt-right and white nationalism, Donald Trump, Colin Kaepernick, and the backlash against his protests, Black Lives Matter, sexual politics in the black community, and much more. America's racial problems aren't going away anytime soon. Keepin It Real will serve as a marker of the arguments we're having right now, and an argument for the changes we need to make to become the better nation we've long imagined ourselves to be. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Dr. Elwood David Watson. Dr. Watson, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am wonderful, as I was saying earlier, considering. I always put that caveat and disclaimer out there. Things could be better, things could be worse, but I tell you what, we're alive.
That's true.
So, all right, let's roll the clock back a little bit in terms of like even becoming an educator, because I was saying that's certainly one thing, if not many things that we have in common. But, you know, this whole notion of, you know, an African-American male becoming an educator at that, let's talk a little bit about, let's work our way up to the book in terms of, was that always your aspiration to do something in education, or to be a teacher, or to teach, or to be a professor?
When I was younger, I grew up in Delaware, as I mentioned to you earlier. I always thought I would do something that was intellectually inclined, but I always just, I didn't know if I'd be a college professor. I didn't know if I would go that route. I was always thought maybe if I taught, it would probably be at the K through 12 level, but at that time. But I thought that I would always do something intellectual, and it was interesting when I went to the University of Delaware as an undergraduate. I always have a couple of professors who would refer to me as Professor Watson, you know.
Right.
You know, how are you doing today, Professor? You know, like, you flunked any students lately? And I don't know, you know, this kind of stuff, you know. So, and I was like undergrad at that time, so I was like, you know, so, even though people were joking at that time, there's always, my grandma always used to say, my late grandmother Maisie, bless her soul, there's a lot of true things spoken in the jokes, so maybe that was prophetic right there. So,
right.
You know, so, you know, and I think that had a professor at Delaware named Mr. L. Jack Ellis who asked me one time when he was walking toward, I had it for a class, and 2 semesters later I saw him. He was walking toward, I guess, his office, and I was coming from the building. And when we got into within talking distance of each other, he asked me, how would you like to be a college professor one day? And I said, well, I've never given it too much thought. He goes, well, why don't you come to my office in a couple of weeks, and we'll talk and discuss it. And we went from there, and, you know, things, you know, one thing led to another, and things worked out, and I guess, you know, fate put me in that direction. But to answer your question, you know, I thought about journalism for a while, which I do freelance write, and I, you know, write for Medium and other publications, and I used to write for Diverse Education, and so I do that. You do that as well, but that was kind of you know, how things ended up. But I always thought about being a journalist, or you know, maybe just, you know, a regular full-time writer, or you know, something along those lines. But I never just was not one of those people that thought out being a college professor from day one. But I don't think that's the profession that a lot of people really, unless they come from a, you know, maybe mom and dad a professor or whatever. But
right.
I think it's one of those professions that people kind of come across decide to do a little later in life. Although very few people do you see at 9 or 10 years old saying, I want to be a college professor.
Right. Yeah, generally you come up the education or the teaching track. But I tell you why I asked that question, because there are, and I guess when I say few, it's relative, because I mean, some would argue, well, we have more black educators and professors than we ever had before. But it's relative. I mean, it's rare. In terms of when you step onto college campuses, in terms of seeing an African American professor, a black professor, unless you're at an HBCU where a good portion of the faculty, as well as the department heads, so forth and so on, may very well be black. But in general, when you start going around the country on college campuses, in many instances, to have a black professor step into the room is kind of like it turns heads.
Yes, it does. And also, too, a lot of HBCUs, a lot of professors at those schools, a good number of those are white professors or East Indian professors. I mean, because there are not a lot of blacks with PhDs. You know, you'll find in some places, like, you know, even HBCUs like Howard and Hampton, a good 20 or 25% of the faculty there are white.
Right.
So that's, so that's definitely even the HBCUs. You know, the student body may be black, but a lot of the faculty and even places like that, a lot of those are. A lot of faculty schools are white, or are East Indian as well. So it's just not a lot of black faculty, and compared PhDs compared to maybe other professions, and there's not a lot of blacks with professional degrees. Period.
Correct.
But the number of black PhDs, compared to lawyers or MBAs, is really, really small. And one could argue it might be about as many black medical doctors working on medical degrees as there are PhDs, because just the length of time it takes to get a PhD. You know, an MBA could be 2 years, law degree could be 3 years, and a lot of times if you're in it for to be compensated, the salaries are going to be considerably higher. You know, if you can make partner a law firm, or if you can an MBA, work for a really top 100 company or whatever, and get in certain areas of it, you can start off making within 2 or 3 years, or even starting off. Really, in some cases, some of these law firms, the high level ones, making well into six figures.
Right.
Whereas a PhD, you don't go into academia for money. You go to academia.
Right.
So I mean, just the length of time it would take to get one, and the time and a lot of people, the vast majority of African Americans still come from modest backgrounds as far as economics is concerned, and many of them maybe feel they want to if they've grown up working class, or maybe even having a hard scrabble existence, they may not want to get not the PhD would necessarily give you a hard scrabble existence, but they may be eager to moving for the sake of their families or their kids or whatever, maybe to an area where where their lifestyle is going to be relatively comfortable.
No, you're absolutely right. And interestingly enough, a very good friend of mine, she's going to be defending her PhD dissertation on Wednesday, on the 25th, and she invited me through Zoom to get a chance to sit in and watch. And you're right. The percentages are minuscule, particularly when you get into PhD. Now, it's one thing to have an ed doc. It's another thing, like you said, to have the MBA, so forth and so on. But whenever you start getting into the PhD ranks, the percentages really plummet. And I said it because even like at the master's level, when you start talking African Americans, the numbers are very low in terms of percentage wise. So once you now go into like PhD level, the percentages get even lower. So that's even all the more reason why I'm asking you, like, okay, what kind of propelled you, or what motivated you, or what led you in order to get to that highest rung of education? Because again, this for me, and I know we haven't had a chance to talk off there, but when I'm not doing radio, I'm actually the principal of a school. And I've been working with kids now for years in terms of trying to help them, particularly African American and Hispanic kids, to help them to understand the importance of education and why they must get as much as they can get, regardless of what choice they intend to make whenever they're done with school, whether they want to be an entrepreneur, whether they want to do a trade, whether they want to, whatever they want to do, they need to get as much education as they can. So how did you what was your motivation to get where you are?
Well, I come from an educated family, to be sure. My father was a high school vice principal, and my mother was, had a nursery and nursing operation. But on my father's side, I come from, on my dad's side, I came from a long line of preachers and teachers within the black community at that time. That,
right.
The professions you could go into. And my uncle George, he died in the 1980s, but he was the first black superintendent in the state of Delaware. He went to Morgan State.
All right.
So like I said as well. So I come from a long line on my dad's side of preachers and teachers, people who were definitely in education. So teaching kind of was one could argue it's in my blood, So it's
right.
Now I'm the only sibling that went into academia. A lot of my siblings went into medical, public health and business like that as well. But I would definitely, but education was still crucial no matter what, like, as you just said, no matter what discipline you go into, whether it's even in trades or whether it's in business, law, medicine, entrepreneurialism, whatever, the education is still going to be crucial because that is education.
Correct.
Education is not just the reading, writing, arithmetic. It's how you apply that education into any type of your own, into any profession that you decide to pursue.
Absolutely. And see, again, last week my guest was another gentleman, African American in education. He actually is at Rutgers University, and his book was concerning the fact that he raised 4 children as a single father. And again, that was not necessarily what we see as the norm in terms of a black man raising 4 children on his own. And all 4 of them became, the front of the book are whenever the kids are little, and the back of the book is when they were graduating college. All 4 of their pictures of graduating college. And the reason I'm bringing that up is, again, to say that these are things that, unfortunately, now for me, that would be the expectation. But for society, it always looks as if, okay, that's the outlier or that's not the norm.
Right. Well, I think they think that is the case, but I think they also feel too that for African Americans, there's always been that type of I guess you could say there's always been it's been an inverted pyramid with Black America. There's been a lot of after the Civil War, HBCU started up, numbers here, and whether it was Cheney University, which is the oldest HBCU in the country, and then you had out the South, because of segregation, you had to go to HBCUs to start up. But for the most part, HBCUs and education in the Black community has always been a very, very, it was a province of the elite. And if you went there a lot of times, if you were a lower income Black person or poor person, you probably had a white benefactor that was sending you to those schools. Because in many cases, there were white fellow, philanthropists and others who donated money to those particular institutions.
Right. So, and that's what I guess where I'm going with terms of where a society might see a Black Ph.D. as an outlier or a Black single father raising 4 kids as an anomaly or an exception. I don't, because that's kind of like my expectation as a Black man. It's like, well, why wouldn't you expect that out of me? And I'm working my way up to your book, by the way. Why wouldn't you expect that out of me, yet you don't have a problem expecting that out of my white counterpart?
Well, yeah, because I think a lot of it has to do with media images. You're right. A lot of people for such a long, the media has had such a negative image of Black people as being deadbeat fathers, or negligent parents, and people who just, it's almost like kids raise themselves, So, it's almost like you would just think once a Black child is born into the world, they have no parents whatsoever, all of a sudden.
Right.
They just raise themselves. But you'd be surprised, I think a lot of people who really actually probably subliminally or constantly believe that, they probably don't think that, you just kind of raise yourself. You set your own schedule, because one, and I've heard Black parents say they've had to tell, some of their, white neighbors or whatever like there, if somebody wanted a kid to come babysit or call, like, well, so-and-so is only like 12 years old, they don't make decisions in this house, and let them know, they do have parents, but it's just like they just, Black people, once you turn a certain age, you just don't even have a childhood, once after you turn 9 to 10 years old, you just set your own schedule what you want to do. That's how they kind of think. We just don't, stick with it. But I think that goes into the larger system too, because even if you look at the public school, you're in a school, you teach in the school system, as you said. I think a lot of times among certain teachers, maybe even some teachers of color, I think a lot of times Black children are not seen as children.
And see, again, that's what I'm saying in terms of even because I'm connecting what I'm seeing as folk, and this is 2020, and those thoughts are still prevailing. Back to the point in your book, in terms of, I started, the discussion out with you being a Black Ph.D. Now, people would say but why can't we have Black folks that's PhDs? Why wouldn't you be able to see that? Why wouldn't you be able to see a Black father that raised his 4 kids? Why wouldn't you see a Kamala Harris now as a Black woman as vice president? Why wouldn't you see a Barack Obama as president? So people are seeing that as something that's strange when it ought not. And I guess that's where, for me, it's kind of like every time I sit there and read things and hear things and listen to commentary as to, well, why wouldn't we do those things?
Well, I mean, look what because like I said, as I said earlier, I think media image and the larger it's a black society, you're not supposed to be seen as that. You're seen as primitive. You're seen as earthy. You're seen as elemental and stuff. I remember when the Cosby Show first started, I was in high school, and people would say, and even some black folks who should have known better, and most white people should have known better, quite frankly, that's not a typical black family.
Right.
That's not. It's like, well, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, there are black families who live like that. I mean, there are black families where, there are black, doctors and lawyers and things like that. You go to Prince George's County, Maryland, places in Jersey and Los Angeles, and, all across the country, Boston, places, there are black families like that. I mean, I said, is the average typical white family like Dallas?
Right.
Now, the difference is with Dallas, the only difference was they were rich, so the Dallas might have been
right. You're right. And see,
but I think
that's good. I like that.
But I think but my point is, I'm just saying to me is that that mentality was there. That they didn't think that was normally for black. If you're black, you're not supposed to if you're the like Sanford and Son.
Right. And see,
and
again, I had hit the exact same commentary that you heard about, well, no, that's not really. And the thing is that during that time frame, I knew a couple, except the situation was reversed. It was one of my fraternity brothers, and he actually went on to become, at that time, the president of the entire fraternity. And that was Milton Davis. Milton Davis because on the Cosby Show, Bill Cosby played the doctor, and Claire, his wife, was the lawyer. Well, in the couple that I knew, it was the reverse. Milton was the lawyer, and his wife was the doctor. And so when people would hit me with that, I said, oh, wait a minute. I do know folks that's in that exact same situation. The only difference is the male was the lawyer and the female was the doctor versus the Cosby Show. But again, it's like this whole, like you said, and the media does play a whole role in the perceptions that we have. As a matter of fact, they've played a very strong role even in, what's going on today in 2020, which is interesting. So in terms of, were there other works that led to this one? Is it in the same, or was each one of your works kind of different, or were they all race related?
They vary. Some of them are related. I do a lot of stuff on gender. I also teach women and gender sexuality studies. So I do masculinity is one of my areas in that area. So I do a lot of stuff I do gender, race, pop culture, and I've actually just updated my resume recently, so I have to get one of the older ones. but I think that I've been here at East Tennessee State University for 24 years now. It's my 24th year, and I've written a lot of stuff on like violence against black bodies. That was a co-edited anthology by Routledge Press, so I did that, and I've done some other works as well. But like I said, I do work on masculinity. I also do work on race as well. My next book coming out is going to be on masculinity, so including black masculinity as well. But I'm looking. So I do a lot of I guess you could say my work is pretty much the intersection of race and gender. But right now, race is so dominant in the news cycle, and I think my book was timely in that sense.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, race, gender in general. I mean, and especially where we are now that we have the first female vice president. All right. And it's a long time coming. All of these things, whether it's race or gender wise, is always long, for me, at least my perspective, where I've seen things like long time coming. And then on the grand scheme of things, it's really not, because from what our race came through over the 400 plus years of slavery, in one respect is not, but then in another respect it is, in terms of, because we're still saying first black this, first woman that, first gay this, first this, first that. We're still saying first that, and where we are in our history. So I find that whole area that you specialize in extremely fascinating.
Well, I think what you'll see is it's interesting. It's very, very. I like to use the word ironic, but it's very interesting. I think that's a better word to use for diplomat. That the first woman of the United States to even reach vice president at that level is a woman of color, and a biracial woman of color. Is that
correct?
So I think, who would ever have thought that in the United States, given its history? So I think that, and I think that in of itself, is very, very, significant, and it's a very, very, congratulations to, Sister Kamala Harris, and I feel that, it is very, very, a milestone on many, many levels. And I think when Barack Obama became president in 2008, he said the naysayers, and some more black, what is they going to change anything? Well, I mean, I think nobody would even expect it's going to change anything overnight. I mean, what will make it? I mean, there were some people who thought that, but say, now what make you think now that the nation's had 400 years of racial oppression and all the dynamics, systemic racism, and everything else, that you think one black man is going to be coming within 8 years, and particularly with the Republican Congress, it's just going to be able to all of a sudden.
That's correct.
That's ridiculous. I mean, there were some things he certainly did for HBCUs, that he did, and he issued some executive orders to protect these things like, those kind of programs and stuff as well. But the reality is that it would be just crazy to think that that's going to happen over, and all of a sudden, he's going to just come in there with a magic wand and things are going to change overnight.
No, that's true. I mean, even with this election, like I was, and I like Ice Cube, I like Cube and some of the other folks. But at the same time, they were coming at, well, they got to have this black agenda. Well, what is supposed to be this black agenda? I mean, what is supposed to be like, what is the expectation of whether it was Kamala, whether it was Biden, whether whomever, that you were going like, we are not going to vote for them unless they have this black agenda. Well, what is this black agenda and what are you expecting? And certainly, and folks on the air know I was not, a Trump fan. You certainly weren't going to get that black agenda from Trump. So
also with Obama, now how in the world is he the first black president of the United States, given what's going on today? How is he going to come out and say, I'm going to have a black agenda and think that's going to go over well? I mean, he could be more sophisticated. But, good and well, because he already had people, he's not a birth, he's a birther, he's not from the United States as well. Man, good and well, how in the world is he going to be able to come out and just say, I'm going to have a black agenda?
Right.
Specific black people. I mean, granted, the situations facing black America in this country do need to be addressed. Now I'm not making it clear what I'm saying, because black Americans are systemically marginalized on many aspects of the country. And Latinos not much better, non-white Latinos. I'm just saying, the reality is, when it's health disparities, race, educational opportunities, health disparities, criminal justice system, you look at it, black folks are pretty much at the bottom on all those.
Correct.
Those factors. So yes, there is something that needs to be addressed, but he could not publicly come out and say that public, I'm going to have a black agenda in that climate, because he just could not do that, and black people, sometimes we have to be a little more sophisticated in how we think. You have to do things.
Correct.
Just recently when I read this article I did for Medium, I talk about labeling, whether people like it or not, labeling matters. When you start saying like defund the police and socialism and stuff like that, when people think of socialism, they think of people like, they think of like Mao Zedong, and they think of, people like Hugo Chavez, and they think of, communism. And it's not communism, but people associate in the United States because they're not, most of the United States, most Americans, they listen to Rush Limbaugh and the people on the right, like that, and they think, when they think of socialism, they think of communism, and they're different things. But the point is, that's what they think. When they think of people, even when they think of the Proud Boys like that, and the militiamen, they think of fascism, people like Hitler and stuff. So my point is, you got to be careful. Labeling means a lot, and the reality is, you start saying defund the police like that. Although defunding police really means is reforming the police, and that's what they should have said in the first place. When you think about defunding the police,
right?
So black people are saying, no, I don't want to do that now, because
right.
They assume
that's right.
Get rid of in their mind, they're thinking it means get rid of the police,
right? And
nobody understand, but nobody would probably want that. But the reality is, but the funding the police means reforming and reorganize the police. That's fine. Most people don't have any problem with that. Particularly after what's happened this year. But that's the term you got to use. Language is very crucial. And
yes, it is.
Language, you got to be very careful how you use, and I think that's very, very, and I think some people on the left have to realize, you got to be very careful because if they try to go for the language, sometimes it can be a little off-putting,
right?
Whether you like it or not. You got to be very, titles and languages are very, very, very crucial. You know what I'm saying? And that's what, and no matter, a title can be very, very crucial because content alone, like with my books and stuff, I'm very deliberative about what kind of titles I use if I want to get it across. So because
absolutely.
I told one of my students one time, one of my contributors didn't like one of my earlier titles of a book on what was it, Alan McBeal or whatever, and she thought it was. I said, well, guess what? I'm telling you right now. The title of the book was called "Searching the Soul" of Alan McBeal. That was a song,
right?
Theme song to the television show that came on in the late '90s up to about early 2000s. I said, well, I put it, and I was trying to be flippant. I said, well, guess what, man? I said, an epistemological study of Alan McBeal is not going to sell too well, okay? I said, marketing, like a lot of academics, so they feel like the content's going to. Content alone will not sell a product. You might have a fantastic product, but if the cover looks drabby and it doesn't look really good, it's a bland title, nobody's going to pick that up. I mean, unless you're a really well-known author.
Absolutely.
So you got to really, all that is a part of, things as well. I mean, and in this 24/7 media age, you've got to be very, very savvy in how the language and the terms that you use.
It is. And, and I meant to pick up on this point earlier when you were talking about when you were in school, whenever they were teasing you and calling professor, so forth and so on. Words do have power. And I agree with I believe you said it was your grandmother who talked about in terms of how
a lot of you think spoken in a joke.
Yes. Words do have power. And to your point of titles and word choice, 'cause I could not agree with you more. There is a big difference between defund the police and reform the police. Big difference. And like you said, people hear defund, and that sounds like, well, are we not going to have a police force because they're not going to get paid? So, you're not funding them, so we're not going to have that force. So what are you talking about? Versus, no, there's some serious reforms. And I take it back even a little bit further in terms of the reform. It has to be more than just training and professional development. We need some reforms in the heart. We need some reforms in how people see people. I get it. You wear a badge.
Sensitivity training, psychological training.
Right. It's
all that goes under reforming the police, and that's what it means. I mean, all that can still be coming under reforming. Nope, I guarantee you, unless they're just the hardcore people like maybe police, people just feel the police can do no wrong or something. But I guarantee you, had people use the term reform the police, there would have been nowhere near as much resistance toward that.
I agree. And again,
I'm talking about among whites anybody, because everybody said, what happened this year with the police officer? I have no problem with that. I can see people say I have no problem with that. But, when you start talking about defund the police, and I'm a democratic socialist, and don't get me wrong, I understand myself, I'm an educated person, and you are too. Well, I know what socialists mean, but the average rank and file person out here does not understand. They think socialism is communism.
Right.
Like I said, they think of Mao Zedong, and they think of, Hugo Chavez. They think of, these third world dictators like Idi Amin, and people who are just, they feel that, somehow if these people get in touch and start running Congress, will be under communism, and and all that
right.
goes along with it. And also, too, if the right wing or the extremely white wackos get in, they'll think we'll be under, fascism, under Hitler and Mussolini and people, and all this. I mean, because people think extreme, they don't think that, when you start, they associate those type of dynamics, and stuff. And I certainly do not want to live under any kind of, communist or fascist system. I'll be honest with you. They know neither one of them. Economically, they're both disastrous and everything else, and there's nothing that benefits me. So I have no interest in living under either one of those type of systems.
Correct.
I'm saying that's the perception of people. People get from that. Those kind of terms they will not serve you well at all. If you try to run for office.
Absolutely. Listening audience, if you've just joined us, and I true hope, one, you've been with me since 6, but certainly, if not at 6, I get it, but I do really hope you've been with me since 7, because my guest this morning is Elwood David Watson, Ph.D., and we're talking about race and gender, and we're working our way up to his work of his latest book, Keepin It Real. And we were just talking about everything being intentional, and I can see here the cover of the book, at least on the webpage that I'm on University of Chicago Press, and I'm assuming this is what the book looks like because I don't have the hard copy in front of me, is a black background with white letters.
Exactly. There was a story behind that, really.
And I know, and whenever all of my guests, I always question them about their choices in terms of colors on the book, photos on the book, in terms of the fonts. Like I'm looking here at the Keepin It Real jumps out at you, the white Keepin It Real off the black background. So I can only imagine. I'm glad to hear that there's a story behind it.
Yeah, the story behind it is that there was the person who was handling it in the marketing, the marketing department and everything as well. The original cover was like red and blue, and I told him no. I said that looks like somebody that would almost think you would think that was like a patriotic book.
Right. Exactly.
I said no. I said I thought something in the marketing. They're in the marketing department. They should know better than this. I said no. We're talking about race here, so the cover needs to be black and white. And,
right.
And the bottom print of it needs to be in gray color, so that will offset that white and black. And everybody who's seen the color said they love it. I said because you need to make it symbolic as possible.
Correct.
Black and white. So I said that, and it all goes back to that marketing thing. But I think that, but that's what I did. But the original was like they wanted it to be red and blue, and I was like, no. But I think it looks much more symbolic, and it speaks to the book much better with that, with the cover the way it looks.
Absolutely, no, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of, and it also, you have the double entendre, the double meanings there as well. You have the race issue, the color, as well as in terms of. Yes, you have the colors black and white, but to me, the issue in and of itself could be a black and white issue, a simple issue that we've complicated.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So you have that double meaning there in terms of, yes, we have the color issue in terms of our skin colors, as well as the subject matter in of itself. We've convoluted and complicated so much that really, it really does come down to a black and white issue. It's really cut and dry, but we have convoluted it so much with so many different things. So the book itself, I see, is a compilation of various essays. Are they different essays from different folks who've contributed to the book, or did you write each chapter as an essay?
No, they're all my essays.
They're all yours. Okay.
And they're basically, there have been a couple of reviews written about the book, and they look at different celebrities. They're divided into several categories, and they're divided into like the politics of whitelash. That's the first section of the book, and then there's looked at the politics of wokeness is the second section of the book, and the third section is like violence against black violence, psychological and mental violence against black bodies, and the fourth section of it is the black celebrities and celebrities, black, white, and so on. Because I have a couple essays in there on white as well. There's an essay in there on Bill Maher. When he used the N-word, the nigger word debate.
Right.
That chapter's called Bill Maher and the nigger word debate. And then there's one by Roseanne Barr, called Roseanne Barr and the Politics of Right-Wing Hypocrisy. And then there's one on Chapter 17, which a couple people emailed about, they liked a lot. And it's like, an open letter to someone on the conservative right. Slavery was really, and I can't put that, you said that word on
right.
there, like put the F word,
right.
Period.
No, I get it. I got it.
People like Bill O'Reilly and Ben Shapiro. So I was like, at the end of the day, I said, I ended without saying to I said, at the end of the day, I said, would any of you all want to be a slave?
Right.
Think about it. It was so benign and so wonderful. Talk about, because it was just like, they talk about slavery and all that bad. I was like, are you out your mind? I mean,
no, exactly. I tell you, Doctor. Let me tell you something. One of the things out of this pandemic that I had really, particularly early on, and I wrote a piece about it in my blog, was this comparison of the pandemic and, our safety guidelines to slavery. I mean, you want to talk about the hair standing up on the back of my neck, and I don't have any on my head anymore, but probably was growing some hair, was every time I would see that comparison to slavery. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is an inconvenience. Don't get me wrong. I don't like wearing the mask no more than anybody else, but I'm doing what I need to do to follow the safety and not get it. But to compare that to slavery, I mean, there was one woman, I have to send it to you if I didn't already, I have to send it to you. There was one woman, she had a photo of herself, and she said the wearing of the mask were for dogs and slaves. Like I forget how she worded it, but I am a human being. Wearing of a mask is for dogs and slaves. And back to this whole word choice thing and pictures, I was incensed. It's like, so what are you saying?
Was this on Twitter?
It was, I think it was on Twitter. I think it was. And I picked the picture off and I wrote a piece on it. And like I said, later on today or over the weekend, if I didn't send it to you already, you might have seen it because I did post the blog on there. And that picture was on Twitter. You're right. But
I send it because I think I said that. But I'm saying it's all about, like I said, it's I always tell people it's how you say things. Like, for example, if I tell somebody, like, let's say you're in a coffee shop, or whatever, and somebody's being loud, like I said, I could say, excuse me, I'm trying to study with you. Could you just maybe keep it down a little bit, or it's just like, would you guys please keep it down, will you all shut up and keep it down? I mean, I've said the same thing, but I've said it in a different way.
Right.
Like, I say shut the heck up, but, so you the hell, say something else, I'm saying, I've still asked you to be quiet, but I've done it in a much more polite way, in one way and the other,
Right.
So I think it's all, like I said, language is very, very, very crucial, like, because you could be saying the same thing, but you could be saying it it's not sometimes what you say, it's how you say it and how you phrase it, because you can still be saying the same thing, but just in a much more benign way, as opposed to something that's very blunt. It's going to probably encounter resistance, to be honest with you,
Right. And see, again, to me, I understand. Actually, conceptually, I don't get the. I could see maybe if you said Maybe. I even kind of stretch it with that. If you say, well, this is kind of like being in prison because we're kind of locked in our houses, can't go anywhere. But to compare it to the atrocities of everything that went on in slavery, I'm like, this
that's
is nowhere.
That's what I do know a damn thing about slavery.
Right. That's the conclusion I came to.
I didn't see it. It's a good thing I didn't see that thing at that time because
I'm going to send it to you.
Yeah, send it, please. Send it. Like, so I was like, like I said, it's my. Like I said, I just got my book too. But like I said, I think that it's like talk about talk about too about slavery wasn't all that bad and everything else because of slaves. Just insanity, just nonsense.
Yeah, it is. I'm sitting here rolling, laughing. And I had to turn the mic button off because you're absolutely right. Because then the question comes, all right, why don't you know? Because that means you don't want to know because the information is out there, and for you not to know and to be able to make silly statements such as that, and that particular woman wasn't the only one. I heard more than one person say, this is like slavery. And my comeback, like, no, this is nowhere close to slavery. Nowhere in its, this is nowhere close to your mom.
Slaves would have like this, brother.
Yeah, right. This is nowhere close to your mom and sister and grandma being raped and your family torn apart and bodies torn from limb to limb. Nowhere close to that.
Nothing to work for nothing. Hot days and long days.
Right.
And like that, sold. May not even see your family from day to day.
Right.
The last time you ever see your family, you dehumanize your words, your whole culture and diet and religion, everything taken away from you. Please, slavery is about as inhumane as you can get.
Yeah, right. And yeah, and like I said, this is an inconvenience, and because I'm pandemic tired like anybody else. It is an inconvenience, yes, but I mean, and even with that, you're talking. Okay, let's say this runs until summer of next year. You're still only talking a year and a half compared to
slavery was ran for centuries.
Right, that's my point.
Exactly, it went overnight and it was gone. It wasn't like no 12-month pandemic.
Right.
So I know I'll be a flipper when I say these things, but I'm just
no, not at all. And I love it.
But that's how you have to talk to people like that, because that's the only way they get with you.
You really do.
You sound like a damn fool.
And I absolutely, because that's exactly where I like. And I don't want. I would hope. I would like to think it's not just because we have some education, but some of that stuff to me seemed like it ought to be common knowledge or common sense, and I realize neither is that common. However,
right.
But at the same time, it's like, really, seriously. But to your point, like you said, that means you're diminishing what slavery was all about. You don't know about it. A combination of both. You don't really care.
That's the bottom line. They don't care. The bottom line is they don't care. Don't want to know. And sometimes I think, and people talk about, but some people I think are just willfully ignorant too.
True.
They want to be ignorant because unless they know about something, the more they can feign ignorance. And that's what happened in the 60s during the Civil Rights Movement when Martin Luther King Jr. came along, because a lot of people in the South had their own predispositions about black people. And here's this man who came on television who was articulate, eloquent, and was well educated. And it showed, black people who dressed well and looked a lot of these people were ministers and stuff. And it really, a lot of white people at that time didn't really want to, particularly Southern whites didn't want to do that. And some in the North either, because they already had their depictions of how black people were.
Correct.
And they were the ones who didn't. Now, granted, the white liberals, but they also level stuff, those who were genuine liberal stuff, television was very influential because it forced them and it introduced the nation to people like that as well, and I think, some of them were okay with it, but it was like a lot of whites, particularly right-wing whites and stuff, it was like, they called Martin King Jr. Hoover despised him,
right.
Everything short of Satan, because he basically dispelled those notions, and he was everything that they, about black people, that he was not supposed to be. He was, sophisticated, refined, at least publicly, and charismatic and stuff. And he was everything that black people in their mindset was not supposed to be, and therefore they were forced to, redefine their notions of what about black Americans.
Absolutely. And matter of fact, not only was the pandemic compared to the civil rights movement, to the slavery, the pandemic was also compared to the civil rights movement as well. They started talking about our freedom. Like our not wearing the mask is the same thing as Rosa Parks not sitting in the back of the bus. Like, are you kidding me?
Steve Moore said that nonsensical stuff. He was like a conservative, like, like I said, yeah, really? So If somebody stopping you from getting on the bus, because they might stop you on the bus wearing a mask, but the reality is that's for safety reasons. They stop her sitting in the front of the bus because of her race.
Right. But that's what I'm talking about. The fact that you want to mix and mingle and try to me, that's an unconscious and maybe conscious effort to downplay what, say, for example, Rosa Parks did, because you're going to equate you're having to wear a mask, as you just said, for safety issues with someone who could not come and go about because of her skin color.
Right. Well, she couldn't, like I said, was basically not allowed to sit in the front of the bus or had to give her seat to a white passenger because of her skin color.
Right. So,
and I think that sparked the bus boycott and stuff. But the reality is, there are people who, like you said, to compare yourself to Rosa Parks, like, get up out of here, please.
Right.
They try that stuff as well.
I'm telling you, and because I'm into our history, because that's the other thing I tell people, look, you need to learn your history. Everybody, I don't care your background, whatever your background is, you need to learn history in terms of how things have worked.
Speaking of Rosa Parks, one young guy was a guy from Alabama who said that he was representing from Alabama. He said his granddaughter said one night about 10, 12 years ago, so the girl's probably almost in high school now, maybe early college. He said that my 6-year-old granddaughter said, Grandpa, what's the big deal about Rosa Parks? All she did was refuse to give her seat to a white man. And he said, right when he heard that, he said that's the litmus test of why history needs to be taught in school. Because
correct.
Right then and there.
That's correct.
She was a 6-year-old girl. She didn't know any better, but that was the classic example of why history has to be taught.
But to your point of she didn't know any better because, like you just said, she wasn't taught it. A lot of times what our kids don't know, and that's why I do a major league focus on it in my school, the reason our kids don't know is because we as the adults have not taken the time to teach them. A lot of times the adults don't know, but that's another conversation. But in terms of what I want to do is I want to get into some of the things that I see here in the description of the book in terms of Colin Kaepernick, so forth and so on. But before I do that, since the comparison's always being made to slavery and the civil rights movement, whenever Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's bus was going through Texas and they got surrounded by all the so-called patriots, that took me back to the freedom rides. I said, okay, since you all want to compare, I said, that how much different was that to what was going on during the freedom rides when buses were surrounded and bombed and gassed?
At this point, the buses didn't get bombed.
Exactly.
Because other than that, no, but the same intimidation, trying to knock the buses off the roads. And,
right.
And I mean, that kind of stuff like that. That was definitely trying to, prohibit, trying to intimidate and everything like that as well. I mean, that was a classic. The only difference was the buses weren't bombed, and nobody was physically beaten up or anything like that. What I'm saying, but
correct.
The freedom rides, they actually bombed out buses and everything else. But that was a very, very good example. That was a good comparison to the freedom rides. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'm looking here at the description.
And the only thing I think that started for doing that, to be honest with you, is because of people were actually they probably had an idea that somebody was watching them on video and stuff, stuff.
And they were. You're right. In terms of the technology, like you were talking earlier, had the pandemic hit prior to technology. Well, it's the kind of same kind of thing to a degree. Because even that, and me and my wife was talking about this the other night, even with the advent and the notion, or shall I say, the reality of video being everywhere, folks are still doing that, because they keep talking about the police wearing body cams. I said, yeah, but they have body cams and folks are videoing and they're still getting up. Folks aren't believing the video. I mean, it didn't get too much more brazen or too much more clear than seeing that officer on George Floyd's neck. I mean, the expression. He knew he was being taped. That's the thing about it. That's what I said about. I think that's what really set off a lot of people. And that was the catalyst there because people saw, and the man knew he was being taped. I mean, it wasn't even like he knew he was being taped. He knew they kept. Yeah, he was almost posing.
Right. And one place, it's almost like he got me really angry when he because almost like certain places. I mean, it's not a video you want to see over and over again, but it's like one place. I think it's about 5-6 minutes in that video. It's almost like he's almost like grinning.
Right. That's absolutely right.
But that's what really set me a lot. That's what really set a lot of people when he saw somebody grinning. Like he was almost like taking sadistic pleasure in what he was doing.
Absolutely. And that's with the presence of cameras all over the place. So you're absolutely right. So back in the day, well, again, historically, it was the whole filming of the hoses and the dogs that really catapulted the civil rights movement once it made TV. Because at that point, folks were seeing it around the world. But it's the same today. You have, and again, that's why I think the George Floyd thing had protests around the world, because people saw that same thing you saw.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think it was just really, really, and don't get me wrong, you saw those kind of things from the get-go.
Right.
Those things have been going, they're not new. You've had George Floyd happened in the 60s and 70s, 80s, and everything else. They were just isolated incidents because the media wasn't covering it that much. And also, now, because that would have been, this was 1989, 90, you probably wouldn't have saw what happened to George Floyd. You might have heard about it outside of Minneapolis. You wouldn't have heard about that.
Right.
Or as much. Now, all of a sudden, there's a video, boom. You can now with the video and people's cell phones and stuff, anybody can post anything on Twitter, which I think is a good thing. Now, the danger of Twitter, like anything else, you got to be careful. You can't always look at everything you read on social media being accurate, because sometimes people have their own agendas too.
Right.
You got to be careful. Like I said, but something like that, there was no question about that was true.
Right.
And I think that it was a very good thing that it was exposed, because it exposed, a lot of people. I think it was something about that. It was like a catalyst that just set people off. Well, I think there was things leading up to it. There was Ahmaud Arbery, then there was Breonna Taylor, and then all of a sudden, then it was this George Floyd, and all of a sudden it was just really, people like saying enough is enough. And like some of these cities, if you look at like Portland stuff, and Portland's only about 3 or 2% black at best. I mean, some of these cities basically are, some of these marches were predominantly white. I mean, in some of these small towns and Idaho and Iowa, there aren't any black people. People wearing Black Lives Matter things. So, I mean, that's that's a good thing. I'm saying that's a good thing. That's a great thing. But I'm just saying to me that and then you had these knuckleheads, I should say, so these black people come out and post some, even a few ministers stuff. I just call ministers knuckleheads, but some of them. But I mean, talk about some of these whites are hijacking the Black Lives Movement. That's silly talk. In fact, we need whites out there protesting and things as well, because that's what's going to galvanize the movement.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with white people getting out here protesting. That is absolutely crazy. Said that whites were hijacking the black. How in the world they hijack the black? Like, they're bringing more attention to it, because you see more white folks out there in places like Portland and upscale whites out there, out there marching. That's a good thing, because the media is going to cover it, and the police are going to be honest with you. The police are going to be more or less likely to try to get violent with them.
Absolutely. Now I'm looking
they may
here.
Want to, but I mean, they may want to, but the point is, they still, because you start going around busting white middle class kids here, the wealthy white kids here, and stuff. You're gonna get yourself in trouble. Okay,
That's right.
That ain't gonna fly. I mean, unfortunately, nobody cares. I mean, now, granted, if you get the wrong rich black person's kid, or okay, there's gonna be some problems too. But the point I'm just saying, but the reality is, as long as you're hurting black people and working class black people, even poor white people at the level, that's where class comes into play. Ain't nobody gonna talk about probably too many responsibilities. But you go out there busting, well-educated, college kids from Southampton and the Berkshires, and start busting their heads and throwing them in, you overnight, this stuff's gonna get ugly.
Absolutely.
So those are exactly the people you be out there on the streets protesting with you. Yes.
No, absolutely. Because again, all of the movements have always had, because that's why I see people don't understand this whole notion of whenever I tell folks all the time, look, I am not anti-white, but I am pro-black. Now, the fact that I'm pro-black doesn't mean I'm anti. The fact that I celebrate me for who I am does not take away from you. So I'm saying all that to say, in all of the movements, there's always been white folks in there. You oftentimes hear Martin Luther King and my white brothers and sisters. If you look through that movement, you'll see even at the I Have a Dream speech, when they had the whole March on Washington, there was a whole lot of white folks that were there. So there, like you said, there's always that need for it in there. And like I said, again, back to this silly word choice of hijacking. Like, come on, I'm like you. Really? Seriously? And
right.
When I look at the description in the book, it says Keepin It Real presents a wide-ranging group of essays that take on key aspects of the current landscape surrounding racial issues in America. So this is the list that's here. The place of the Obamas, the rise of the alt-right and white nationalism, Donald Trump, Colin Kaepernick, and the backlash against the protests, Black Lives Matter, sexual politics in the black community. How do you address very quickly each one of those? And I just want you to whet the appetite, because I want folks to order the book. Matter of fact, I usually at the last part of I'll let you know. But is this also an ebook format, or is it just paperback?
It's an ebook too.
Okay, good. I can download it on Amazon on one of those.
Yeah, I'll get you a copy directly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, but in any event, let's talk a little bit about each of the areas that you're talking about. Okay, with Kaepernick, and I remember when Kaepernick came in the league, when he was a quarterback, the first couple of years with San Francisco, and I'm a diehard in the wool 40+ year Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But when I saw Kaepernick quarterbacking with San Francisco, I said, that kid is the truth. He's a good quarterback. And then the next year or so, I don't know if he had gotten injured or something along the line, but the next thing I knew, he was doing the kneel downs, and he was now becoming more of the activist. But that sent people apoplectic. People started going crazy. He's un-American, yada, yada, yada. Because, folks were losing their minds because this young man would not stand during the singing of, the Star Spangled Banner, or whichever one of that, the national anthem. Okay. Talk a little bit about that, and then kind of work your way through each, a little bit of each one.
Well, with Colin Kaepernick, I said in many ways that, I'll let you ask about the ones that you're interested in, and I'll talk about those.
Okay, so let's start with, because I'm kind of looking through the list. Let's start with Colin Kaepernick. Let's start with Kaepernick. Because like I said, This is a kid, dynamic athlete, but now he kind of turns active, and everybody turns on him.
Well, yeah, what I do with that piece is I talk about Colin Kaepernick and the height of hypocrisy, in the sense that the same people who are criticizing Colin Kaepernick, they're criticizing him for the same things they're doing. I say he exercises his First Amendment right to protest.
Right.
Some of these people are criticizing him, and they're doing the same thing by criticizing. He's doing nothing different than what they're doing. That's what I talk about in there,
Absolutely. Okay, so then that's enough to whet my appetite for that chapter, because I could not agree with you more in terms of the same way like you just said. You said it best. I don't even have to repeat it, in all honesty. But the very thing that you're always fighting for is what he's doing, and now you're lambasting him. I mean, to the point where the president just went off and called them all kinds of names, SOBs and this or that. All right.
So his mom said, she goes, "I'm a proud bitch."
I know that's right. So, okay, let's go to what was the role? And because this is the crazy thing. Obama, he was on 60 Minutes the other night. And then I'm looking on Twitter, and I saw somebody had posted on there. He's I'm trying to think of the words he said. A pompous, that's what he said. Obama is a pompous double S. And I was like,
that's not the word for uppity nigger.
Right, exactly. So, but that's what I was like, pompous. But how did now Obama being president feed into everything that we've gotten? I know how it is. I'm asking it as a rhetorical question, but I just want to hear your thoughts.
No, it's like, he's everything they were. He was black. Like I said, he was intelligent. A black man is something, like I said, who does, as far as they're concerned, a black man, a lot of white people thought, well, at least, we may have had black Miss Americas, we may have had black, a few black governors, we may have had black people win the Academy Awards and those kind of things, but at least we'll never ever have a black president. And when that happened, that last, unattainable goal for people of color in this country was shattered. And now with the VP, that's gone now. So, two top officers in the world, pretty much, that was just something that was just not supposed to be. And I mean, and all of a sudden, and his wife, Michelle Obama, like I said, as well, and they hated her just as much,
right.
Ways probably more for different reasons. But I think they would, he was everything they were supposed to be. Black people living at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, a black man, a wife, and two
right.
beautiful girls. And I mean, if anything, they were supposed to be, that's an affront to white racist sensibilities. The only time you're supposed to see a black president was supposed to be like in a fiction novel or in a movie. It's not supposed to be like Morgan Freeman. It's like, or some, like James Earl Jones, the movie, right. The first black president, you remember 1970s,
right.
Whatever. I mean, that's the only time you're supposed to see a black president, not one in real life living, actually, talk with world leaders and a wife and, the wife of the First Lady of the United States, and little kids playing on the lawn and with their friends and everything else. That just sets on the white folks in a tizzy. Because they'd rather see them. They'd rather see the Obama's supposed to be cooking and cleaning in the White House, is supposed to be sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom. That's not supposed to happen.
Oh, absolutely. And those 8 years were scandal free. And again, I look at Twitter a lot, and so I'm looking at the feed, and I see some of the commentary that comes. So I saw one guy. He actually is a radio show host who said the Obama years was the most corrupt years in the history of the presidency. I'm like, oh, wow. And you actually believe it. And okay, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say if they were. Well, I tell you what, Obama's real good at keeping it under wraps, then, unlike the one that we got now.
Considering given all the racism and stuff, and just the things they said about him and stuff, he wasn't cheating on his wife and all that kind of stuff. So they tried to say, he used to terms like bathhouse Barry. That was supposed to be like a code word. He was supposed to be,
right.
Cheat on his wife, he must be gay because he must because he didn't cheat on his wife or anything. Just all kind of horrible things.
Right.
Nothing wrong being gay by any means. But I'm just saying that. But just saying he was cheating on his wife. And
right.
Stuff. Just he was undercover and stuff. I mean, just stuff because they couldn't make up any kind of, and they couldn't find any kind of thing on him, so therefore, they tried to say she was transgender.
Right. I heard that one also.
They just very malicious, nasty things, I'm just saying, and characters about how, they would call them apes and all those kinds of things. Just very,
that's
very
right.
nasty, just very racially vile, the ugliest, type of, came out, he was the birther situation, like Ole Tates and all that, when he wasn't born in the United States. Well, don't you think the McCain campaign and the Clinton campaign would have made those an issue before he became president? That was
correct.
He wasn't born in the United States. We know Arnold Schwarzenegger, that before he became anti-Trump, but the Republicans used to love him.
Right.
He himself, he was not born in the United States, and they tried to get the Constitution amended so that he could run for president. So, so it was clear it wasn't about that, it was about race,
Right. And see, again, now, all right, this conversation we're having, again, for those who kind of understand history and the role that it plays in things, you can start beginning to have a quote unquote intelligent conversation. But some of these commentary, for a fact, like, okay, obviously you don't know, you haven't studied, and you're just, talking off the top of, your head or talking out the air. But my thinking in terms of with Trump, I personally, had Obama probably not been president, I don't think Trump would have ran. I really don't. I think Trump's thinking was this, outside of what I believe, and this is totally opinion here. I want to make that very clear. Outside of his jealousy of Obama, I honestly, in his mind, believe that Trump was thinking in terms of, well, if a black man can do it, anybody can do it. And I don't think he was the only one that thought that. Because to that point, what you just made of a black man getting there, I honestly believe a lot of people say, well, if a black man can get there, anybody can. Because if you notice, the candidates, in the 2016, you had, I was amazed that Trump got beyond it. You had 21 candidates on the Republican side running on that side. And you had, in the beginning, 5 to 10 on the Democratic side that was running. But I honestly believe in folks' mind, it occurred, like the notion came, well, if that black man can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, I think they even thought, yeah, exactly. And I think also a couple things there. I think even in 2012, I think Romney and them thought that there was a fluke. We just had a black president was a fluke. Therefore, he was, because you could see how visibly surprised he was when he lost that night. You could see his face. You could see how shocked he was. You could see Tom. Right. You could almost see the shock in Paul Ryan's face, who was the VP and stuff. And I think Paul Ryan overall is a good, decent man, but he's very, But I think, but you could see the shock in their faces. I think they were just so shocked that they had lost because they just figured, black president, that was just a fluke. The economy was bad and stuff, and people decided to take a chance on this black man, and therefore, and they didn't realize, there are more people who really voted for him than who as opposed to Romney for several reasons. Anyway, in 2016, I was really if Trump ran in 2012 and got the nomination, I would not have been a surprise because that was a relatively weak field. But Michelle Bachmann, Herman Cain, and
right.
I mean, they were some of the other people in the Newt Gingrich. They were not necessarily exactly as strong as Santorum, the group if you run against.
Right.
But in 2016. I was very surprised because Trump ran against some of the most, he had governors, senators, cabinet officials, and for what he was able to do to go in boom, 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 and just knock every primary except for Ohio, and I think Kasich won that, and that was barely. He won John Kennedy won that barely. I mean, but that shows you that the Republican Party is becoming the Trump Party,
Right.
I mean, so he basically just took the party over. And I think with Hillary, I think there were a lot of problems in the sense that I think a lot of people thought Hillary came across as entitled.
Correct.
Hillary was just a bad candidate. Let's just call it what it was. She was a bad candidate. She was not. She was scripted, and she was just not. She was not likable. There was Clinton fatigue, and I think a lot of people she just was not. And I don't know why the Democrats have put so much money behind somebody who you already knew had a 50% negative rating.
Right.
I mean, that was just crazy. I mean, why would you do? You knew already had that high negative rating, and then a lot of liberals didn't like her. A lot of women didn't like her. You know what I mean? So it was just like young blacks didn't like her. I mean, Hillary did not even. There was a large base of the Democrat Party who did not vote for her because they probably figured, well, she's going to win anyway, and I'm not going to vote for her anyway. And then the next morning, when they woke up on the iPad and saw President Trump running across the screens and stuff, like, what happened? I was like, you didn't vote. That's what happened. But I'm just saying, what I'm saying to me is that, I mean, I think there was a lot of factors that, that contributed, to Trump winning in 2016.
Correct. No, it really is. And then, because there's another in terms of backlash as well, is that now, mind you, again, as we just said, if Obama was corrupt, then they were real good at concealing it. Because the biggest scandal for Obama, for the most part, was wearing of that tan suit. That was kind of like his biggest scandal per se.
And they had her to go out to little girls one time. I guess when she resigned, they did. Right. Because she criticized, because I think it was some kind of turkey or whatever. And I think they said that the girls acting rude. I guess they were rolling eyes. Well, right. And they wore mini skirts to the press conference. I was like, and I wrote an article. I was being sarcastic. I said, can you imagine this? Get this, people. Sit down, because you're not going to believe this. Those girls wore miniskirts to the press conference. Can you imagine the teenage girls wearing miniskirts? Lord have mercy. I said, I never heard such a thing in my life. Oh, my Lord. I've never heard that in my life. Teenage girls wearing miniskirts. I've never heard of it. I mean, I was like, wow. I mean,
they're like, right, like you're really reaching for stuff to pick up. But my point in terms of that is kind of like you had a lot of folks that were like, all right, we had to put up with this black man for 8 years, so you're going to put up with ours for the next however many years, 4 years or whatever, regardless of how crazy or whatever he does, we're still better with that than we are with the intellectual black man.
I think it was that, but I think it was some of that, but I think it was for some people, I think it was also that. Now, I do say this, and I don't get wrong, I think some people did vote for Trump out of economic reasons.
Right.
I think there are people in the Midwest, a place like that, who are very, very. The economy in those places have been decimated since NAFTA in the 1990s and others as that, and they. And I think that Trump came across as a businessman because say what you want to say about Trump, but you didn't understand his message. You said jobs, jobs, jobs.
Right.
And the great Make America Great Again could mean you could read that many ways. Hillary Clinton. I mean, tell me one thing that Hillary Clinton couldn't stand for. I couldn't tell you one thing she stood for.
Right.
I mean, she spoke in double speak. She was convoluted. I mean, it's like she didn't really she didn't seem to have any kind of commitment to anything. And she picked Tim Kaine. Nothing against the guy. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he's a decent human being and stuff, but that didn't help because he spoke Spanish. Whoever told her that didn't do a damn thing for that thing. I mean, basically, she should have picked. If I were her, I would have picked Julian Castro. Because I think they would have got some Hispanic votes and stuff that might have put it over the top. That's who she should have picked, selected in 2016. But she had not, because picking Tim Kaine, those white men were going to vote for her already. The white men who were going to vote for Hillary Clinton were going to vote for her already.
Right.
The ones who weren't were not going to. So basically,
right.
The white men on that ticket didn't do one thing for her one way or the other. Did not do a thing. So, I mean, whoever gave her some bad advice. And I think it was, in that sense, so it was a badly ran campaign on many levels. Like I said, and I think the messenger was the problem. I think Hillary Clinton was just not the person people wanted to see the next president of the United States. She wasn't going to win. And Trump, like I said, it was just, Michael Moore, to his credit, kept saying, look, I'm telling you people, I'm going across the country and everything else, and I think Trump's going to win this thing.
Right.
Seriously, he said, I'm telling you right now. And he almost thought Trump was going to win this time, except he thought Biden had a better chance, and I think Biden did win this election. But I'm just saying to me is that I think but I do think that the fact that Trump was able to get so many votes this time, definitely shows that there's still a strong base of Trump support out there.
Well, there's no, and see again, that's where the division comes, because you're still, with everything that's happened chaos wise over the last 4 years, you still got 72 or 73 million votes. Regardless of whatever went on over these 4 years, you still got 70-some million votes. So that does say a lot. And if you've just joined us, as you can tell, now you're listening to Dr. Watson, you can tell by his talk that he keeps it real. And that's the title of the book, Keepin It Real. So if during this interview you've been listening and a couple of times you've jumped back like, wow, did they just say that? Yeah, we just said it. Because that's the title of the book, Keepin It Real. And the author is Elwood David Watson, Ph.D. The book is Keepin It Real, Essays on Race. I told you this is going to be a good one this morning. The Essays on Race in Contemporary America. I said at the beginning of the interview, there's a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for the ages, and it doesn't seem to go away. Like it says in his description, America's racial problems aren't going away anytime soon. And they're not. That's just the reality. So that's the book, Keepin It Real. I've been talking this morning to the author, Elwood David Watson, Ph.D. And I'm encouraging. I know I'm going to, I appreciate the copy you're going to send me, but I'm going to download a copy as well so I can start reading. I usually don't get a chance to read the books until after the interview. I always tell my guests that. I can skim it, I can do my research on it, but I don't get a chance to read it cover to cover until after I've spoken with them. And I know I'm going to have a blast reading this one, because if you've written anything like we're talking this morning, yeah, you're keeping it real.
Oh, those essays keep it real now.
But you know what? And I appreciate that, because one of the reasons why we don't get where we get is people pussyfoot around and sugarcoat and try to be politically correct and all that. And that was the one thing I did agree with Trump on when he was running, about the political correct piece. Now, he took it to the next level and extreme. But I did agree with him in terms of that whole political correctness thing. I think folks need to get issues on the table and say whatever it is. That don't mean you have to be nasty. Keeping it real doesn't mean you have to be nasty with somebody. But you call the facts as they are, and then you deal with them.
Well, that's one problem I find with the left. In some segments of the left. Don't get me, the right can be too extreme the other way, because there are people on the right who just want to be blatantly rude and they want to use, racial slurs and sexist slurs without any kind of consequence. But the people on the left, we get too wrapped up. Some people on the left get too wrapped up in, like I said, language and lexicons. Like they,
right.
Well, he's a pre-adult or whatever. No, he's a child. Child.
That's right.
That's what he's a child, and there's nothing wrong with calling him a child.
Right.
Right. Because that kind of stuff don't mean anything at the end of the day. It's what you do, not what you say. And, we get, wrapped up in like symbols and things like that as well. That's one of my essays in the book, without saying too much about. I said, let's not get too wrapped up about symbols. And while we all know the power and importance of symbols, but symbols are, at the end of the day, and I'm glad that, and I put this in there before they did it. I said, Aunt Jemima and those things should be retired on some level. Uncle Ben's rice. I said, Jemima's pancakes and Ben's rice will do just fine.
Right.
That being said, let's not worry about, no, flags should not be hanging outside of State House stuff. They need to be in museums. But at the end of the day, once those symbols and things are removed, and those companies like Mars and Pepsi and all this stuff, I said, when they donate $25 or $30 million to a cause, that's great and that's wonderful, but that's pennies for what those companies make, okay?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The reality is, all that's good, and they can issue an apology and take down whatever, but 5 or 6 months later, things have really hadn't changed too much for the black community. Let's put their feet to the fire and make sure they have, internships for black kids, or, entry-level jobs, or make sure they promise to hire at least 15 to 20% of their force is going to be people of color. Those are things we need to go about substance, let them put their money where their mouth is, but don't worry so much about symbols and apologies or hollow on some level or anything else. We get too wrapped up in that kind of stuff, and then, 7 or 8 months, things really haven't changed one way or the other. That's, if they're really sincere, let them put their money where their mouth is, so their mouth where their money is, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Let them really devote their money and the cause to those type of things that are going to really help the black community and black and brown communities more tangibly. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm going to do it again. Dr. Watson, I could not have said that any better, and I could not agree with you more. The symbolic stuff is just, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid, and it doesn't do anything beyond that, as you said. Nothing. That's why nothing has changed, is because, and that's what I think Ice Cube and some of the others, I think that's what they really were trying to get at, but just kind of their approach. Just the messenger they were doing. Right. I think that's what they were trying to get at, that we've got to go deeper than just the symbol. Like, not for nothing, and I know some of the Black Lives Matters folks, but the thing for me is, okay, what are we getting beyond painting Black Lives Matters on the street?
Yes.
Kind of to what you just said in terms of the symbolism. Because I did a piece, again, back to my blog, I did a piece on why I really was not for the tearing down of the various statues. Now, I get it in terms of, again, conceptually, yes, that's giving folks an opportunity to continuously be exposed to a time when. But my thing was this: well, rather than worry about tearing them down, why not build more of ours up? But that's A. And then secondly, what now happens when folks say, well, you tore my statue down, so I'm going to tear your statue of Martin Luther King down?
Well, I mean, and there are people who can certainly say that as well. I think that it would be harder to do that, but you're right. But people with Martin Luther King Jr. stood for something that was totally, he never stood for oppressing people, and you know that. I know you know that.
Correct.
Right? Where, Nathan Bedford Forrest, he did stand for, people like the ones as well. Look, as I said, do I think swastika should be hung down?
No, that's what I'm saying. No. That's where I agree with you totally.
You did not say that at all. I understand. You did not say that. I'm just saying, I understand when people say Confederate flags stop being on state houses, but the point is, they should be in museums. Because
right.
They definitely be a museum. But your point is we're on the same page as far as saying, look, that's all and good, but don't spend too much time with symbolism, because that's not going to get much when all said and done.
Right.
As I said, some of the things I mentioned, let's focus on more substantive things as well.
Right.
I think that, and it's it kind of leads to one of my other essays, about Rachel Dolezal. I said about, Rachel Dolezal, I said, the lady, whatever she wants to refer to herself is, no, she was perpetrating fraud, she needs to be called out for it. But, at the end of the day, people spend 2 or 3 weeks worrying about,
right.
what she being cultured appropriate. I was like, look, the woman identifies, who cares how she identifies herself, really? She thinks she's black. Ain't too much you can do about that. I guess I told my class one time, this guy in my class, I said, okay, I'm gonna say you're Napoleon, and I'm gonna say I'm Napoleon. You say you're. I said I'm gonna say I'm Napoleon, talking about myself, and you say no, you're not. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm Napoleon. No, you're not. I'm Napoleon. No, you're not. I'm Napoleon. I said, see, I can say it all day. If I think I'm Napoleon, ain't too much you can do to change my mind. Okay? I said, ain't too much I can do. If you think I'm Napoleon, that's it. So the point I was trying to make is, if the woman thinks she's black and culturally feels she's black and stuff, as long as she's working for the betterment of black people, fine.
Right.
Don't spend too much time. She's some woman out west nobody even knows knew much about. Nobody's even talking about her today. My point is, I'm saying, there was about a month and a half talking about she being culturally appropriate and all this kind of stuff. Don't spend too much time. That's the kind of stuff that white conservatives like to spend time on.
Right.
They want you to spend time going back and forth with that kind of stuff because, at the end of the day, you could argue with somebody, if that person has the power, they still, you could argue to the cows come home. If you ain't got any power, you're not influencing anything. It doesn't make any difference.
That's
they know
right.
And they can make up all these kind of dynamics and everything else because you'll spend your time arguing with them because the point is they know they still have the authority and the power, or they have the power over you. And that's what the white conservatives, they know they have the power. They don't want to admit it. Some of them, but the reality is, they know that. I see some of these white racists stuff. They know the black people are marginalized society, but they also know it's the way to keep you marginalized, to keep you off kilter and attack.
Correct.
You argue with them all day long. I said, don't spend all your time doing that. You got to get people off of them. But the protests and things, I'm all for protesting. Protesting is very important. But the reality is, you've got to get people in office. Like one article about Black Matter just came out recently. Who is a Black Lives Matter member? Enough of you. You can protest to the cows come, but if you don't got people in office representing your interests and working out for you, you're still going to be marginalized.
Correct.
And the people what they care about you protesting as long as they're making their laws.
Correct.
We got to kind of refocus, and I think, and unfortunately, like Keepin It Real put out here like it is, there are some black leaders. I think there's some black people out here who are definitely genuine, who want real change and genuine and care about the people. But you also got to realize too, there are people of color, and even some liberals who also have a vested interest in maintaining things.
Oh, correct. Oh, for sure. That's
right. They do the same with their people.
Absolutely. That's why for me, on both sides of the argument, I could see where each group is coming from, and I can see the extremes on each group. Because I tease people all the time. I say, well, I guess, for me, let me see. I'm trying to see how to combine the words conservative and liberal. I say, I guess I would be like a conservalib or a libaserve. However you want to combine those two words, because I could see both ends of the spectrum. I could see why people would think. But the part I guess I get is in terms of, like you said, when the marginalization comes to the point of now you're costing people their lives. That's when I really have to step in. But some of these other views, and you were giving it earlier in terms of the difference between socialism and communism and so forth and so on. Absolutely. And I tell you what, we're down to the end of, I hope you've been with us, and I hope you've been listening intently and closely. If you want to get in further detail, get the book, Keepin It Real. And you could tell by our conversation that Elwood David Watson, Ph.D., keeps it real. I've had a blast with this conversation. At this point, Dr. Watson, this is what I do. I turn the mic off, and you have the opportunity to promote any of your works, book signings, Keepin It Real, any of the other works, how folks can get in touch with you, your websites, telephone, anything you want to promote. The only thing you cannot say is the dollar amount, because that folks can work out with you whenever they get in touch with you. But anything short of the dollar amount, if you want to shout anybody out, this is your opportunity to do it.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. I'm glad you've had me on your program. I really appreciate it and reaching out to me. I can be reached on Twitter at BleachBread. You can contact me via Twitter. You can contact me via Facebook. You can contact me at my campus address at East Tennessee State University. Just go to Elwood Watson, East Tennessee State University, and my contact information will come up. And I could also, like I said, the book is Keepin It Real, Essays on Race in Contemporary America, and it's published by the University of Chicago Press. It's published by the University of Chicago Press, and you can find out a lot of my other books on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble or any place as well. And like I said, I'm not that hard to get in touch with, so I'll be more than happy to speak with you. And I'm one of those accessible academics. I'm not one of those people that, talk about loving the people but don't want to necessarily interact with them, like Cornel West would say. He's right about that. But so I'm definitely a person I'm accessible to, and I'll be more than happy to, correspond and communicate with you if you reach out to me.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for rising early to join. I have thoroughly, and I almost hate to use the word enjoyed, because it's beyond just, enjoyment. I mean, it's been intellectual, it's been inspirational, it's been enlightening. Like, those are more the words I want to use in terms of, again, because anytime I get into discussion on race and gender, I'm like, that excites me. I know for some people, they're like, man, you think too deep. I'm like, no, you don't think deep enough. But
there you go.
in any event, this conversation was like, that started my day and my weekend.
Well, I'm glad. Like I said, it was great. Like I said, and I hope your viewers, listeners, were able to, get supercharged for the Saturday morning, and before they go out to brunch or before they go out whatever, maybe they'll have some. Maybe this will be something to talk about over breakfast.
Oh, brunch. Absolutely! And again, the book is Keepin It Real. The author is Elwood David Watson. ELWOOD DAVID WATSON. And he's Ph.D., or if you want to say Dr. Watson, that'll work as well. But this is one before the day is out. I guarantee you, I will have it in my iPad, and I will have started reading it.
You'll be getting one before long anyway, so I'll make sure you get one.
All right.
But like I said, this was great. Like I said, and thank you to the viewers who got up, and thank you for having me on your program. I truly appreciate it. So.
Well, same here. We will definitely be in touch. All right.
Absolutely.
Have a wonderful weekend, Saturday, and Thanksgiving.
Likewise. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Peace.
Take care.